Before you judge a person, ask yourself this. If the thing you're most ashamed of were sitting on a table, shining under a lamp, could you walk past it without touching it? Adrian Blackwell, who built an empire by betting on human weakness, was about to find out if his own housekeeper had stronger hands than he did. He set the room like a trap and a confession. The East Library breathed low and expensive. Amber light pooled in silk-shaded circles, and the scent of old paper and polished wood hung like a secret no one wanted to name. On the walnut coffee table, he arranged three objects: a thick leather wallet fanned with hundreds, a platinum Blackwell chronograph catching the lamplight like it had learned to flirt, and 10 feet away, an open safe door standing ajar, as if money itself had forgotten to be careful. Upstairs, laughter. Sloane Vesper's laughter. It slid down the stairwell like perfume, lovely until it suffocated you. A jazz record crackled, soft brushwork, pretend sophistication. He'd come to recognize that sound as the overture to a performance. Her audience, always someone, and the theater, usually him. Adrian loosened his tie, sank into the velvet sofa, and let his eyelids fall until the world became a narrow band of light. He rested a hand over his chest like a man already making peace with the worst thing he believed about people. $3,000 gone last week. Not much, but thieves don't start with vaults. They start with door cracks. He had narrowed the access list to three. Margaret Whitcomb, housekeeper of 3 decades whose spine could level a soldier. Roland, the driver with a back that popped when he bent too fast. And Nia Carter, the new maid who moved like she'd been trained to erase her own footsteps. Nia never took tips. She never lingered. She never met his gaze any longer than politeness demanded. Quiet, contained, and, if you listened to the wrong voice in his head, dangerous. Sloane had laughed when he'd brought it up. "Oh, Adrian, please. Margaret and Roland couldn't steal your breath if you told them to. The quiet one did it. They always do." He had not believed Sloane. He had wanted to. There's a difference. The grandfather clock tucked its second hand behind a cough and began the slow, cathedral work of counting. Adrian listened to the rhythm. Always the rhythm. The market had one, boardrooms had another, and people, despite their contradictions, clicked in patterns if you watched long enough. Past midnight, the house stilled. Even expensive quiet has temperature. This one ran cool along the baseboards. He slowed his breath and let the library claim him as furniture. The door eased open. Nia Carter came in with a cart that barely murmured across the Persian rug. Navy dress, white collar, hair braided close. Not pretty the way magazines insist, beautiful the way a stone wall is, built to hold. She didn't look at him. That's the first thing he noticed. People always checked. For approval, for danger, for permission. She took in the room in one sweep and began. She dusted deliberately, like tidying a battlefield after the last soldier left. Picture frames straightened to a soldier's inch. Brass bookends learned their angles. Her hands moved with an intimacy that wasn't possessive exactly, but tender. A one-woman parade for order in a world that refused it. When she reached the coffee table, she paused. The wallet gleamed, ridiculous under the lamplight. The watch winked like complicity. She didn't touch either. She slid a cloth across the table, long strokes, even pressure, then tucked the cloth back as if she were tucking in a child. He waited. 10 seconds. 20. Look at the safe. She turned, eyes lifting to the mouth of money yawning open across the room. There is a sound people make when they decide to sin, a micro inhale, a tiny thirst. He'd heard it across conference tables when a buyout offer was too sweet. He braced for it now. Nia exhaled instead. She crossed the rug, bent, not toward the cash, but toward the sofa. She lifted the wool blanket that had sloughed to the floor, shook it once, and laid it over his chest with a touch so careful it made something old and rusted inside him creak open. Her hand hovered, a check that he was breathing, human, not just a ledger with legs. Then she went to the far shelf, reached past leather-bound first editions, and took down a small Bible so worn its spine had begun to surrender. She brought it back, set it gently across the wallet and the watch like a modest, unshowy sermon, and whispered, "Some things are better left untouched." She didn't look around for cameras. She didn't pose for the moral of the story. She left, closing the door with a courtesy that made the whole house feel like it had manners again. Adrian opened his eyes. For a long time he did nothing. The blanket held a quiet heat. He watched the dust shift in the light and thought, you can engineer every variable and still fail to predict the one thing that matters: mercy. He checked the wallet, counted, full. He checked the watch, ticking. He poured the rest of the Dalmore and didn't drink it, because he wanted a clean head for the replay. He slid the painting on its hidden hinge, extracted a thumbnail camera card, docked it to his phone, and watched the whole scene again. Blanket, Bible, whisper. He watched it a third time, then made himself stop. Obsession is just control wearing a softer shirt. Upstairs, laughter again. Sloane's. But thinner now, like a ribbon pulled too tight. He tucked the camera card into his inner pocket, straightened the blanket, and said out loud to an empty room, "All right, Miss Carter, you win the night." He did not sleep. He lay next to Sloane, who shifted and mumbled and dreamed in a language that sounded suspiciously like applause. He stared at the shadow seam where ceiling met wall and thought about a woman who had laid a book across temptation without asking for credit, and a blanket across a man who had set bait and called it principle. By dawn, he decided two things. He would speak to Naya, and he would hate whatever the conversation made him admit. The morning broke thin and clean. Washington light does that in certain seasons, goes through you as if testing the integrity of your frame. Adrian skipped the eggs, took his coffee black, and stepped onto the veranda. The oaks along the south lawn dragged Spanish moss through a breeze that sounded like it had made peace with itself. Footsteps, soft. Nia, carrying a basket of folded linens, like a small, patient planet. "Miss Carter," he said. She stopped as if brakes were built into the soles of her shoes. "Good morning, Mr. Blackwell. Walk with me." He didn't wait for her, yes. Men like him rarely do. But she came, matching his stride by instinct, neither deferential nor defiant, just steady. "I left the safe open last night," he said. "I saw. You didn't close it. It wasn't my place. You placed a Bible over my wallet." Her eyes flicked to him, then returned to the path. "When people won't listen, sometimes scripture gets past the parts of them that know how to pretend." "That a line you keep handy?" "Only on nights I can't afford to argue." "Do you think I was testing you?" "I think people like to prove what they already believe." He stopped walking. "And what do you think I already believe?" She met his gaze fully then. He'd expected fear or anger, maybe even a small, tired righteousness. What he got was worse. Accuracy. That I could be bought for $3,000 and the satisfaction of not being invisible for once. He swallowed, not because she was wrong, she wasn't, but because of the way she said invisible, as if she learned to roll her own edges flat to fit through doors built for other people. "You refused every tip you've been offered," he said. "Tipping is payment for performance," she replied. "I show up for the work, not the applause." "Sloane says—" She raised a hand a fraction. "With respect, sir, Ms. Vesper says whatever lifts her above the person she's talking about." He almost smiled. He didn't. "What do you want, Miss Carter?" "Peace," she said. "Enough quiet to hear myself think." They reached the end of the veranda. On the far side of the property, the greenhouse glinted, and the koi pond pretended to be a mirror. A gardener's radio murmured a Motown song off-key. Ordinary, the kind of ordinary that feels like a luxury when your life has been teaching you to survive. "Why here?" he asked. "You could have cleaned any smaller house." "Why mine?" She looked past him at the huge bones of Blackwell Hall. "Because chaos is loud enough to drown out grief," she said, so simply that the line walked itself into his chest and sat down. He had an urge then, rare, unwelcome, to tell her something true. He resisted. People like him don't hand out keys to the rooms they don't want seen. "Thank you for last night," he said instead. "For the blanket." "It was cold in there," she said, "and you look like a man who had decided not to trust his own sleep." "Do you pray, Miss Carter?" he asked, nodding at the Bible. "Sometimes," she said. "Sometimes I just use it as a fence." He frowned. "A fence? To keep my hands from doing what my hunger would let them." There it was, the sentence that separated her from 90% of the men he did business with. She didn't call temptation a test she'd passed. She called it a hunger she'd managed. One admits an appetite. The other pretends it doesn't exist. He dismissed her gently. You may return to your work, because he needed to be alone with the discomfort that came when a story refused the ending you'd prepared for it. Sloane arrived in the kitchen with sunglasses and a silk robe like armor designed by someone who thinks fabric can scare poverty away. Did our saint pass? She asked, plucking a strawberry from a bowl and biting it like the berry had wronged her personally. This isn't a pageant, he said. Everything's a pageant, she said, smiling into her phone as she scrolled. You just prefer the backstage angles. Why are you still here, Sloane? She popped the green stem between manicured nails. Because your house has mirrors I like. Because your name gets me rooms where the napkins are folded like swans. Then casting him a slow look. Because I like the way you look at me when I'm almost too much. He poured orange juice he did not want and set the glass down too hard. I know when someone's lying, he said. Do you? She asked, brushing past him, a kiss like a watermark on his cheek. You didn't know about me until I wanted to be known. When the door swung shut behind her, the kitchen felt both bigger and less complete. He went to his office and opened Nia's file again, not because he needed to, but because the repetition made the information mean something new. Nursing aide, volunteer, grief counseling facilitator. Son, Micah, deceased at 7. He clicked the cross-reference Denton had prepared. CPS note, unsubstantiated. A neighbor, a claim of neglect, a case closed by absence, not by proof. He looked out the window. On the lawn, Nia was pinning sheets under the sun. Each sheet snapped and surrendered, then held. Rhythm. She had found one in the house, and he could feel it begin to reorder things. Little things, but that's how a ship turns. Margaret knocked, carrying the gravity of bad news the way only a woman who has seen men undo their own homes can. Sir, she said, I don't say this lightly. I think Miss Carter is carrying something that will not be crushed simply by ignoring it. I know, he said. For once, I would like to be useful to something that isn't a headline. Then don't call her strong when you mean silent, Margaret said, and left him to the arithmetic of that correction. He found Nia again near the sunroom, crouched to gather towels a gardener's daughter had spilled. She laughed with the child, not the way adults perform at children, but like she remembered a language from before Ake learned her name. Ms. Carter, he said. She rose. Mr. Blackwell. I'd like to speak privately. He led her to a small sitting room no one used because the furniture whispered old money too loudly. No cameras, no theater. Just two people and a truth they were both trying to meet without flinching. You didn't take my money, he said. I didn't. But you're hiding something. Everyone is, she said. The poor just don't have the budget to make it look like a virtue. What was in the envelope Margaret saw? She didn't look away. My son, she said. Micah. How did he? She spared him the clumsy mercy of letting him finish. Asthma. I was on a double. He had his inhaler. The neighbor heard him cough. They didn't want to get involved. I got home in time to be too late. He had handled dying companies with fewer tremors in his hands. I read the CPS note, he said quietly. I figured, she replied. We can end this part quickly, Mr. Blackwell. I left him alone. I did. I was poor and proud and thought competence could outrun biology. It couldn't. Now I work. I breathe. I refuse to drown people to pay back a debt grief won't accept anyway. He wanted to apologize. He also wanted to hide his apology under a policy so it wouldn't cost him anything. He chose something less clever. I am sorry, he said. The words landed awkwardly but upright between them. And I'm grateful for the blanket. She nodded. It didn't look like a house that remembered kindness. Do you think I suspected you because you're black? A muscle jumped in her jaw. I think you suspected me because I'm quiet and because somewhere behind your eyes a story runs in which quiet people are either hiding or stealing, she said. Race makes the story louder. It doesn't write it alone. He took that in and let it do what true things do when you don't argue with them, rearrange furniture. What do you need from this house, he asked finally. Clear rules, she said, and the kind of trust that doesn't vanish the first time I breathe wrong? He nodded. Then here's my rule. Tell me the truth even when it makes me smaller. and I will try hard to deserve it. That's 2 rules, she said, and the corner of her mouth betrayed a grin. Fine, he said. I'm not negotiating with the person who fixed my library without touching a dime. She stood to go. Her hand found the doorknob, then paused. You looked cold last night, she said without turning. That's why I brought the blanket. The Bible wasn't for you. For who then? My hands, she said, and left. That evening, the house put itself back together the way houses do when the day has been complicated and you want to believe in the lie of tidy surfaces. Sloane was gone, allegedly to a charity brunch where cameras raise more money than donors. Margaret hummed in the laundry room, a hymn maybe, or a threat. Roland washed the town car like it had personally offended him. Adrian took the camera card back out, not to rewatch Nia's kindness, temptation comes in many forms, but to delete the file. He hovered his thumb over the trash icon and couldn't. Not because he wanted leverage, because the footage felt like a small sacrament and he did not trust himself to be its priest. He locked it in a drawer behind a false panel. He poured bourbon and stared into the music room that had been locked since his father died. Sloane had once called it a tomb. He'd told her to mind her metaphors. Tonight he admitted the accuracy. The lid of the grand piano had not been raised in years. Dust wore the keys like a veil. He opened the lid. He pressed a note. It rang thin and brave in the tall room. He pressed another, then 3 together, then a chord that had learned sadness so long ago it had turned itself into strength. He played until his hands stopped shaking, and a thought slid into place so quietly he almost missed it. If you test people to confirm your cynicism, you will never be surprised by goodness when it arrives. He closed the fallboard. In the reflection across the black lacquer, he saw not a billionaire, not a brand, not a man who knew where every $1.50 of downtown slept at night. He saw someone Nia had tucked in without asking who he'd been to deserve it. When he finally killed the lights, the library returned to its own weather. The blanket waited on the back of the sofa. The Bible was back on its shelf. The safe door was shut. And somewhere in the house that had been built to be admired, but not entered, a new rule took root. Guard what matters. Leave what tempts. Cover what's human. What breaks a powerful man faster? Being proven wrong, or being asked to live differently because of it? Adrian Blackwell had just met a truth that didn't fit in a ledger. Now it wanted a place at his table. Morning came clean and pale, a kind of light that checks your seams. He skipped breakfast and let the veranda's breeze iron the night out of his shirt. The oaks hummed, the koi pond pretended to be a mirror, and the house, usually a cathedral to control, felt like it was waiting for instructions. Soft steps. Nia again, basket of linens, sleeves rolled to the elbow. He didn't rehearse this. Men like him always rehearsed. But something about last night made a script feel dishonest. Ms. Carter, he said. She stopped. Good morning, Mr. Blackwell. Walk with me, he said, then caught himself. Please. They took the flagstone path in silence. For once, he let the quiet do the first draft. I owe you 2 things, he said at last. Thanks, and something better than suspicion. I'll take clear rules over thanks, she answered, not unkind. They don't evaporate when you change moods. He huffed a breath that might have been a laugh on a braver day. Then let's write them. Rule 1. You tell me the truth even when it makes me smaller. Rule 2. I try, no, I commit, to deserving it. That's 2 rules and a promise, she said, the faintest smile tugging. We can work with that. They reached the conservatory. Sun poured through glass onto glossy leaves. Nia set the basket down and ran a thumb along a dusty philodendron, as if apologizing. Why this job? He asked. Why this house? Chaos is loud enough to drown grief, she said. This place has polite chaos. I can do my work inside it without explaining why I'm not okay. What does okay look like to you? Quiet evenings, enough money to never choose between medicine and rent, a garden, maybe a dog, people who don't decide my character before I finish a sentence. He looked at the greenhouse glass instead of her face. I can offer some of that, he said. The part with money, the part with respect if I keep my mouth honest. As for the garden, there are 2 acres that forgot why they're here. She dusted the leaf again. Respect first. Gardens grow better in it. He nodded. He'd spent years making respect perform as deference. It didn't like the costume. It showed. Ms. Carter, he said, formal, because what he was about to offer required dignity. I want you as my household manager, not to elevate you for show, to build a house that runs on truth. She blinked once. You're sure this isn't pity in a tuxedo? No, he said. It's clarity in work boots. Her gaze held. My terms, I don't work Sundays. I don't smile for cameras. I don't trade silence for a title. If you lie to me once, I'm gone. He let the relief show. Good. I don't need a shadow. I need a spine that talks. She considered him, then nodded. On a trial basis. Done. He almost left it there. Almost. But he had learned, last night, in a library where a Bible weighed more than cash. That almost is where cowards live. One more thing, he said carefully. There's a note in an old report from Selma. CPS. Unsubstantiated, but I know, she said, saving him from his own delicacy. A neighbor called. I was working a double. Micah was 7 and brave. He shouldn't have needed to be. The case closed by paperwork, not by comfort. He waited for shame he could rescue. She offered none. Only truth with a steady pulse. I can't undo that part, he said, his voice smaller than he preferred. But I can build something in its vicinity that makes the road gentler for someone else. If you do, don't put my name on it, she replied. Let the help be the headline. Agreed. They parted there. She to the staff wing, he to the office with its tidy shelves and untidy heart. He dialed Denton before the courage cooled. I need a grant out by noon, he said. Quietly, Selma Community Center, childcare expansion. Denton whistled. You're in a mood. I'm in a correction, Adrian said and hung up. Sloan arrived in a silk robe like a banner announcing itself. Sunglasses in the kitchen, lip gloss at war with the morning. Did Little Miss Sunday School pass your ethics exam? She asked, tearing a croissant with the entitlement of someone who never wondered where the second one came from. I'm reorganizing the house, he said. She's the household manager. Oh, darling, Sloan laughed. You're adorable when you cosplay redemption. She popped a strawberry, then placed a sealed envelope on the marble with a theatrical sigh. Speaking of organization, these items I'll have sent to my place. Jewelry, a few dresses, the Porsche. I've met someone who prefers his women present and his questions absent. He read her note. It smelled expensive and like a door swinging shut. Is this goodbye or a press release? He asked. It's mercy, she purred, pecked his cheek and floated out. He watched the door for a beat too long, not because of love, but because endings always drag pieces of your pride out like loose stitches. Harold appeared. Sir, private line. Adrian braced. Blackwell. Detective Reed, Selma PD, a low professional voice said. You requested info on Nia Carter. I can confirm a CPS call 2 weeks before her son's death. Unfounded. No autopsy. Death certificate reads asthma-induced cardiac arrest. No foul play suspected. Thank you, Adrian said. He set the phone down and stared at the wood grain until it rearranged itself. He opened Nia's application again. Volunteer grief facilitator. That line hurt him more today, not because it was sad, but because it was a discipline. Choosing to sit with pain you didn't cause. That takes a different kind of muscle. Margaret knocked. 3 sharp raps that meant business. Sir, Ms. Carter had a visitor last week. Waited by the back gate. Didn't come in. Who? A woman named Carla Brooks. 3 kids, 2 jobs, pride like a flag. Ms. Carter wants to bring her on. Do we have budget? Always, Margaret said dryly. For what matters? Tell Ms. Carter to hire her, he said. I'll sign whatever you put in front of me. Margaret allowed herself a smile. The house is breathing, sir. Don't scare it. I'll try not to, he said, surprised by how much he meant it. By noon, Nia's terms were on paper. Margaret witnessed. Denton blessed the ink. Adrian slid the folder across the library table. Trial period, 60 days. Authority over staff schedules, vendor contracts, and minor capital repairs up to $15,000. Nia scanned it, finger-tracking lines like a pilot reading a landing checklist. You're giving me real keys, she said without looking up. Better you hold them than I pretend to. She signed. He exhaled. Next, she said briskly, shifting into a gear he recognized from boardrooms. Maintenance. Charlie's back is failing. Move him to light work and hire a temp for the heavy lifts. Kitchen. Margaret's still doing too much. We need a part-time prep cook. Grounds, the western beds are wastes of dirt. We could cut floral spend by 20% if we plant perennials that don't die of hurt feelings. He almost laughed. Hire who you need, he said. And thank you. Don't thank me yet, she said. Wait 6 weeks. If the house feels like a home, then you can buy me pancakes. I was going to offer a bonus. Bonuses end, she said. Pancakes make a morning kind. He wrote pancakes on a note card and tucked it into the drawer with the camera card from last night. 2 sacraments in one box. The first day under Naya's hand sounded different. Not quieter. Purpose has its own hum, but even. Schedules clicked. Vendors arrived on time because someone who didn't flinch when they sighed asked them to. The laundry room lost its eternal choke of backlog. Margaret hummed a hymn that didn't sound like a threat this time. Roland, the driver, found Adrian in the motor court. She told me to take the Cadillac in for brakes and then told me to eat lunch for once, he said, bewildered. That's called leadership, Adrian said. It felt like respect, Roland said, tasting the word like a rare spice, then flushed and went to do as he'd been told. At dusk, Adrian stood at his office window with a glass he didn't drink, watching Naya behind the guest house with Harold, reviewing a clipboard. She pointed, Harold nodded, wrote something down like the words, "Wade something you could not afford to drop." He'd spent a decade making everything run through him. It had worked if your definition of work included ulcers and the kind of loneliness that echoes in a 12-foot ceiling. Now he watched someone else put her hands on the lever and felt released. The phone buzzed. Denton, his attorney said, regarding your other headache, Marshall Klein is circling. Isabel's filed preliminary notice on a trust your father kept off books. Adrian's jaw tightened. Send what you have. Already on your desk. And, Adrian, don't let them define the narrative first. He ended the call and opened the folder. Old photos that smelled like fresh lies. A trust deed with Frederick's signature and a birth certificate naming a boy as his son. He didn't believe it. He couldn't dismiss it. That's the worst kind of paper. Plausible, poisonous. He didn't touch the bourbon. He went to the music room. The lid opened easier tonight. He played the same unsure chord until it stopped being ashamed of itself. The sound spilled down the corridor, found the kitchen, met Nia at the pantry door where she was restocking things she'd already counted. She paused and listened. Even grief, she knew, softens when someone gives it a melody. She set the basket down and walked to the doorway of the music room. Not crossing the threshold, he saw her in the lacquer's reflection before he turned. I'm not interrupting, am I? She asked. You are, he said. And I'm grateful. She leaned on the jamb. Bad news? Old ghosts, he said, with stationery. We'll light more rooms, she said. They don't like that. He looked at her like a man looks at a map he didn't know he needed. Let me ask you something I'm not proud to ask. I ask it anyway. If I name something after you, will you forgive me for the optics? No, she said. But if you build something that outlives both of us, I'll meet you there every year and we can argue about the sign. He laughed then, open, unprotected. Deal. Also, she added, practical as a list, Carla can start Monday. Tell HR I said to skip the ornamental paperwork and pay her a week in advance. First weeks are where good decisions die. Nia nodded once. You're learning. I have a cruelly competent teacher, he said. She turned to go, then hesitated. One more rule, she said over her shoulder. Don't call me strong when you mean I didn't cry. His reply came from an honest place. Then I'll call you clear when you are, and brave when it costs you. Good, she said, and left him with a piano that no longer sounded like apology. Night pressed its forehead to the windows. Blackwell Hall, for years a museum of polished silence, hummed with a small industrious hope. Somewhere in the staff corridor, a new name, Carla, rehearsed tomorrow's courage. In the greenhouse, leaves turned their faces to the afterglow like prayer. Adrian returned to the library. The blanket from last night lay folded over the sofa's back, squared with military neatness. He touched it with a knuckle, as if acknowledging rank. He opened a fresh legal pad and wrote at the top, House rules. 1. Guard what matters. 2. leave what tempts. 3. Cover what's human. 4. Tell the truth that makes you smaller. 5. Build what outlives the headline. He underlined the fifth one. Twice. The phone lit. A text from an unknown number with a photo of a man in a trench coat at a cafe. Silver hair, eyes like winter. Marshall Klein. The caption read, "See you soon, son." Adrian didn't reply. He slid the phone face down, closed the safe without ceremony, and switched off the lamp. In the dark, the house felt less like a vault and more like a chest. One of those old cedar ones where families put what they want to pass forward. On his way upstairs, he passed the west wing and paused. The doors there had been kept shut for years, partly to save heat, mostly to save heart. He opened one. The air smelled stale, then curious. Tomorrow, he decided, they'd start there. Fresh paint, new beds, a wing that didn't hide its history, just insisted on a better use. He climbed the last steps and stopped outside the room that used to be Sloane's. Empty now. Quiet. Good. Down the hall, he passed the door where he'd heard a lullaby last night. He did not linger. You don't eavesdrop on grace. You just try to deserve the house it keeps making possible. By morning, the house moved with a new rhythm. Lists were checked, deliveries arrived on time, and even the hallways felt straighter, as if the walls themselves respected a schedule. Adrian liked that feeling more than he expected. It meant he could stop micromanaging and start paying attention to the things that wanted to remain hidden. At 11, a black Lincoln rolled up the gravel drive. Harold started toward the door, but Adrian lifted a hand. He already knew the silhouette stepping out. The shoulder width, the winter white hair, the way the eyes scanned cameras before they scanned faces. Marshall Klein carried the kind of history that does not knock. It announces. "Still your father's house," Marshall said on the steps, his mouth shaping a smile that had lost its heat years ago. "It is mine," Adrian answered, and did not offer his hand. Inside the study, Marshall placed a thick envelope on the desk. He did not sit. "There are matters your father left incomplete. A trust off the books. Assets you never accounted for." He gestured at the envelope. "There is also a claim." Adrian did not touch the paper. "From whom?" "A woman named Isabel Hawthorne." The room tilted a fraction, Sloane's world and his father's world brushing at the edges. "What claim?" "She says your father had a son," Marshall replied. "There are documents, letters, photos, a birth certificate." "Convenient," Adrian said, but the word tasted like rust. Marshall's eyes flicked toward the piano room, as if memory had its own map. "Settle it quietly, or it will not be quiet." He left without a backward glance. Harold appeared in the doorway, waiting for orders. "Tell Denton to come now," Adrian said. "Bring Margaret and Ms. Carter to the library after lunch." The envelope remained unopened for 3 full minutes. It felt like a lit match. He broke the seal, laid the contents carefully on the desk, and let each page say what it wanted. A scanned trust deed bearing his father's signature. 2 photographs of Frederick Blackwell at a garden party with a younger woman who could be Isabel in another life. And 1 birth certificate, Andrew F. Klein, Mother Isabel Hawthorne, Father Frederick Blackwell. Denton arrived with a face trained not to flinch. "We will need chain of custody, original documents, ink and paper analysis. No digital scans. A courier will take these to the lab today." He glanced at the certificate. If this is real, Isabel could press a residual claim. If it is not, she is looking for attention or leverage. "Or both," Adrian said. When Margaret and Nia came in, he repeated only the essentials. Margaret crossed herself without apology. Nia listened without blinking, then moved to the window as if the light could help her think faster. "What do you need from me?" she asked. "Eyes," Adrian said, "and clean angles." "Then you need 2 tracks," she replied. "Law for the facts, narrative for the noise. People will believe the story that arrives first." Denton nodded. "She is right." Adrian looked at Nia. "Find out what you can without leaving footprints." "I will speak to Dorsey," she said. "We will start where the paper says it began." 2 hours later, she was gone in a staff car with a plain tote and no jewelry. The drive to Alexandria was short, the booth in the diner in the back, the coffee bad enough to keep nosy customers away. Dorsey took the list she had prepared. Confirm the hospital named on the birth certificate and its archive status. Track the certificate number. Verify whether the ink matches the year of the alleged signature. Locate Andrew F. Klein if he exists. Establish guardianship. Map Isabel's recent movements in any coordination with Marshall. Quietly, Nia said. No cyber footprints. Dorsey grinned at the word quietly and went to work. Back at the house, the new rhythm did not break. Carla Brooks came for an interview that was not really an interview. Nia met her by the service entrance, handed her a clipboard and a set of keys and said, "You start Monday. Pay arrives Friday in advance. We invest in first weeks here." Carla covered her mouth with her hand, then nodded, then set her jaw the way people do when relief arrives and they do not want to cry in public. At dusk, Adrian watched a storm gather on his desk. Denton called from the lab. "We have preliminary results. The ink on the trust deed was not commercially available until after your father's death. The hospital named on the birth certificate burned down 7 years ago. No archives survived. The signature style is a credible imitation. The paper watermarks are wrong." "So it is a forgery," Adrian said. "Likely," Denton replied. "But we need more." His phone lit again. Dorsey. "The boy is real. Andrew Klein, 12 years old, enrolled at a boarding school in Vermont. Legally adopted by Marshall Klein 3 years ago. I have no record of Isabel as a guardian. She has other records. None that hold." "Thank you," Adrian said. He hung up and stared at the study's crown molding as if it might volunteer a way forward. Nia was already at the doorway. He had not heard her approach. She had the gift of appearing without feeling like a ghost. "Say it out loud," she said. "Marshall is using a child and a lie to reopen a door that should have stayed shut," Adrian said. "He wants the name. He wants a slice of the legacy as proof he mattered more than the record shows." "What do you want?" she asked. "The truth," he said, "and to stop him before he draws blood in public." "Then you go to Vermont," she said, simple as a grocery item. "You take the facts. You look him in the eyes. You make it clear that you see the whole play. If you are wrong, you will know it in the boy's face. If you are right, Marshall will blink." "He does not blink," Adrian said. "Everyone blinks," she answered. "They just do it where they think you will not notice." They left before sunrise. The sky over Dulles was the pale gray of a pencil, waiting for its first word. Denton arranged an SUV and a driver in Burlington. The tires hummed like a low metronome for an hour of winding road. Marshall's estate was a colonial with a wraparound porch and a barn painted a red that wanted to impress a camera. A woman with Marshall's eyes opened the door. "I am Sarah Klein," she said. "He is expecting you." The parlor smelled like lemon oil and old bourbon. Marshall sat with a book he did not read. He stood and the performance began. Polite words, the measured weight of time, the controlled air of a man deciding who will speak first. Adrian placed a thin folder on the table. Ink analysis, paper watermarks, archive verification. Your certificate is a counterfeit. Your story leaks. Marshall glanced at the pages, then set them aside as if they were a menu. "Your father kept a shadow book. He owed me." "He is not here to owe you anything," Adrian said. "You are using a child and a rumor." A voice came from the hallway. "Who is using me?" A boy stepped in, tall for 12, hair too long for his uniform, an expression that held curiosity without suspicion. Andrew looked at Marshall, then at Adrian, then at Nia, and then at the floor as if he had been taught that floors are easier to answer. "We are having a private talk," Marshall said. Andrew looked at Adrian again. "Are you my uncle?" Adrian knelt so they were eye level. "No," he said, careful with the shape of each word. "You are Marshall's son. That is a real thing. It is enough." The boy exhaled, something unclenching inside his shoulders. "Okay," he said, then stepped back. "I will be upstairs." When he had gone, Marshall's face lost a layer of polish. "You think a few lab reports win a war?" "I think truth travels slowly and arrives with better luggage," Adrian said. "Pull your claim before I file motion after motion that will tie your name to this fraud in every court of record." Marshall's jaw worked. "You think the world runs on truth. It runs on leverage." "Then consider this leverage," Adrian said. "Every hour you keep this game alive, I will spend twice that money on the one thing you cannot counterfeit. I will build the parts of this world you ignored while you chased rooms where people are paid to clap." He stood. Nia stood with him. Marshall's sister watched from the doorway with an expression that looked a little like relief and a little like grief. In the car, silence held for the first 10 miles. The hills wore their late autumn and did not apologize for the bare branches. Finally, Nia said, "You did not promise a headline. You promised a building." "Headlines starve," he said. "Buildings feed." On the flight back, he drafted notes for an op-ed that was not a defense but a confession. "My father was brilliant and distant, and I have been busy pretending that those two facts did not shape me. I am done pretending. If a legacy matters, it must survive sunlight." When they landed in the rain, Washington looked like it had been scrubbed and left to dry. Harold met them with umbrellas and a car that smelled like warm leather. "Miss Carter," he said. "Carla arrived early. She is in the kitchen with Margaret, asking how to cut the produce bill without cutting quality. She might be a magician." "Or she is a mother," Nia said. "It is the same skill set." Adrian stepped into the library and found the envelope from Zurich waiting. Denton had left a note. "We will need a decision." He opened it and saw Frederick Blackwell's tidy hand. "To my son. This money was not clean. Use it better than I did." He looked toward the west wing and imagined small beds, clean linens, a door that locks because the person inside has earned the right to sleep without listening for footsteps. He looked toward the music room and saw a future where the lid stayed open. He looked at the blanket on the sofa back and the Bible on the shelf and understood that a house can teach a man to choose the right weight. "Name it right," Nia said from the doorway. He had not heard her come in. "If the money is a confession, the building should be a promise." "It will be," he said. "No plaques with my face. No speeches that taste like policy. Grants that hit bank accounts before the first week ends. Night care for kids whose parents work the shifts that keep the city running. Scholarships that do not require people to sell their pain to get them." She walked to the desk and rested 2 fingers on Frederick's letter, as if peeking at a ghost. "And the story?" she asked. "Isabel, the papers, Marshall." "We tell our version before anyone writes theirs," he said. "Not to perform, to leave a record." "Then write," she said. "I will gather what they cannot twist. Schedules, receipts, the small data that makes a life make sense." They worked until the rain turned the windows into soft screens. In the kitchen, Margaret tried a new pancake recipe for tomorrow because promises needed rituals or they remained ideas. In the motor court, Harold checked the tires on the Cadillac because safety does not ask for a headline. In the greenhouse, the leaves turned their faces toward a sky they trusted to return. When the phone finally rang, it was Isabel. The voice poured sugar and smoke. "Julian, no, you are Adrian now. Your father loved me. He left me something. He left me someone. You had your chance to be honest," he said. "You chose spectacle." "You of all people know how to use spectacle," she replied. "Do not pretend you are allergic to it." "I am not allergic," he said. "I am done paying for it." He ended the call before she could make a memory out of it. Nia stood in the doorway. "You did not slam the phone," she said. "Growth." "I wanted to," he said. "Wanting is human," she answered. "What you did is a choice." He took a pen and wrote 5 words at the bottom of the legal pad that still held his house rules. "Start with the West Wing." He underlined it once and set the pen down. The rain slowed. The house settled. Somewhere, a hallway clock found the top of the hour and sang it softly. And for the first time since Marshall Klein stepped onto his steps, Adrian felt the ground under him harden into something that would hold. The morning after the rain broke, Blackwell Hall woke with a clarity Adrian had not felt since his father's funeral. The West Wing doors stood open to air out the stale, and the smell of lemon oil drifted down the corridor like a small announcement that the house would be used, not merely displayed. Nia arrived at his office at 8 with a clipboard, 3 schedules, and a question that refused to dress itself up. "Are you ready to speak in your own name?" He looked at the Zurich letter again. "To my son. The money was not clean. Use it better." He folded it once and slid it into the drawer with the camera card and the note that said, "Start with the West Wing." "I am," he said. "Today." Denton called at 9. Lab confirmed everything. Forged ink on the deed, wrong watermark on the certificate, no survivable archive trail for the hospital. Enough to make noise in court and enough to generate a spectacle in the press if they wanted it. They would want it. We will file a preemptive statement, Adrian said. No denial line, no righteous fury. We tell the truth we can prove, and the truth only I can say. Draft your legal paragraphs. I will write the part that bleeds. He moved to the library, set a new yellow pad on the table, and wrote a first sentence that made his hand hesitate. My father was a man I admired without understanding and resisted without courage. He kept going. He wrote about learning to measure people by risk and return and the cost of that arithmetic. He wrote about a house that had forgotten what a room sounds like when it is allowed to become a home. He wrote about the West Wing, about turning storage into shelter and showpieces into chairs where someone tired can sit without being observed. He wrote about a woman who placed a Bible across temptation and a blanket across a man she did not owe. He did not write her name. He did not need to. When he finished 2 pages, he pushed the pad to the middle of the table and let silence read it first. Nia came in without knocking because she had been invited to do exactly that. He nodded toward the pages. She read them slowly, the lines moving through her eyes like water through clean stone. Do not argue with your own past, she said. Invite it to stand where it can be useful. One paragraph should admit your complicity without making you the only subject. The rest must be buildings and programs and receipts and people's names who are not famous. He scratched out a sentence that sounded like performance and replaced it with one that sounded like a plan. The Sterling Chronicle's editor took the pitch within an hour. The op-ed would run at dawn. The Zurich Fund weighed the room even when no one mentioned it. He looked at the numbers long enough for Greed to try a costume. Then he named the thing before it named him. The Maya Fund, he said aloud, testing the syllables in the air like a key in a lock. Not because of optics, because my father left me a confession, and the first person to teach me what to do with confessions was Nia R. Carter. She studied his face as if testing for residue. If you call it that, she said, the work must be the headline, not me. Grants that move faster than guilt, daycare that stays open past midnight for nurses and line cooks, tuition checks that arrive before the class start date, and no eligibility requirements that ask people to bleed on paper to prove they are hurt enough. We will launch with 15 million, he said, all of it from Zurich. We will say where it came from and what it will become. We will publish the ledgers quarterly. We will audit ourselves louder than anyone else could. Say it exactly like that, she answered. Then be boring for a year and let the results talk. By noon, Denton had a press plan that sounded like scaffolding rather than fireworks. The Chronicle would run the essay and a companion Q&A about the financials. A second outlet would receive only the audited numbers in a short statement. No exclusive profiles, no glossy photographs, no staged philanthropy with people who had not asked to be background. At 2, Eileen arrived without notice, a string of pearls that could have been a weapon under other light. She settled in the drawing room without invitation and waited for Adrian to come to her as if the house owed her posture respect. He did, because respect mattered even when power bothered him. You are about to put the family in the confessional, she said. Tradition is not built to survive that much sunlight. Tradition that can only exist in the dark is not tradition, he said. It is habit. You sound like your mother, Eileen replied, and there was something jarred loose behind the words. A memory, maybe, or a complaint delivered by someone who had learned to confuse duty with love. He told her about the West Wing plan, about rooms with names that were flowers instead of donors, about a pantry that would always be full. She listened longer than he expected. When she stood to leave, she paused at the door. If you are going to do this, she said, do it so well that the next generation does not have to explain you. Then quieter, she added, I will send over a box of your mother's letters. If you are going to say her name in public, you should know the sentences she liked best. After she left, he stood alone in the drawing room and let the air settle back into its shape. Some legacies do not bless you directly. They remove obstacles and call it love. Late afternoon, Isabel went to the press. The Washington Insight ran a teaser headline with an old photograph and a newer lie. By evening, a freelancer posted a thread of insinuations dressed as questions, and anonymous accounts amplified them for sport. Nia watched the whirlwind from the edge of it, eyes narrowed not in anger, but in measurement. They will keep speaking until our story exists, she said. So finish the last paragraph. He did. He ended with 5 sentences that refused grandness. I am not asking for credit. I am documenting work I can be held to. If you want to criticize me, read the ledgers when they post and show me what we missed. If you want to help, pick a line item and carry it with us for a year. I am not building a monument. I am building a schedule. At dawn, the Chronicle published. The op-ed did not trend like gossip. It moved like a slow current, shared by people whose names did not usually travel far. Quoted in group chats and PTA threads, and the internal channels of 2 hospitals. Emails began to land. A daycare director in Anacostia who could double evening capacity if someone paid 2 salaries. A community college bursar who always watched 3 students drop out the first week because a promised scholarship cleared the bank on day 10. A shelter coordinator who could place 4 women into safe apartments if someone paid first and last month and did not make them stand up in front of a gala to say thank you. At 9, an alert pinged from Dorsey. Off-site security backups from Frederick's study resurfaced. Nia plugged the drive into a cold laptop at the pantry table and skimmed thumbnails until she stopped breathing. Isabel, 2 years ago, entering Frederick's office with a key she should not have had, palming an envelope from the safe, leaving with her face turned away from the camera, as if an old habit warned her where lenses live. We will not circulate this publicly, Nia said. We will let the Chronicle's legal desk verify and hold. We will not build our case with humiliation. We will build it with timestamps. Denton agreed. He delivered the footage through a channel that valued evidence over adrenaline. The Insight pulled their long read before it ran. Isabel posted a story from a hotel bathroom mirror and then went quiet. By noon, the first commitments to the Maya Fund hit the foundation's account. A regional grocer underwrote the pantry for a year because Margaret made a list that could not be argued with. A retired judge wrote a personal check with an apology attached for the times he had not believed poor women when they said a job schedule and a bus route could be a trap. An anonymous donor covered first-week wages for all new hires in the program for 12 months because Nia had insisted that is where good decisions die. Adrian walked the West Wing with a contractor who did not care about surnames. We stripped to studs in the first 6 rooms, the contractor said. New wiring, sprinkle system, 2 egress points per unit. Code wants doors that close soft so people do not wake each other. 2 laundry stacks at the end of the hall. Bring the hallway lights down a notch. Bright is not always safe. Approved, Adrian said, and meant it in the way that makes both money and blood move. He found Nia in the greenhouse. Sleeves rolled, hair up, hands smelling like basil. The glass shed the rain and kept the light. And for a moment the house felt like a place built by intentions that did not lie later. She did not turn when he stepped in. She was watching the slow drip of water from a leaf to the soil as if it were teaching a class. You were right about boring, he said. I want this work to be dull enough to be trusted and stubborn enough to survive spectacle. Good work is a metronome, she said. People who live on adrenaline forget that. They think building is an event. It is a repetition. He told her Eileen would send his mother's letters. He told her about the messages from the bursar and the shelter coordinator and the daycare director who cried at her desk between calls. He told her about the contractor's plan. He did not tell her about how much he had wanted to reply to Isabel with something sharp and cinematic, and how much he did not miss that kind of satisfaction when he let it go. She handed him a small notebook. Carla's note, she said. Inventory cuts, vendor swaps, items staff actually eat, items rich people order, and then leave on plates. She saved you 11% in 2 days. Hire her full-time, he said. Not $12, $22. And tell HR to stop writing job descriptions that sound like we are hiring robots. She laughed once, a sound with edges softened by belief. Done. The day ran not on spectacle, but on checklists. Denton confirmed the filings. The Chronicle posted the fund's audited starting balance and the rules that governed its outgoing grants. Margaret chose mattresses with the stubborn wisdom of someone who has seen too many backs fail early. Harold drove the Cadillac to a shop in a part of town where mechanics wear their names honestly on their shirts, and he returned with brakes that respected stopping as something more than a metaphor. Evening came with a sky so clear it felt rehearsed. In the music room, Adrian played a line, and then played it again until it landed in his hands the way it sounded in his head. In the kitchen, Nia whisked batter while Margaret judged the heat beneath a cast-iron griddle by scent alone. Pancakes as promised, ritual as required. They ate at the end of the long table instead of the middle. He poured maple syrup like someone learning kindness requires practice. She told him about Camille's latest exam scores and the way relief can make a person sleep so hard the world has to knock twice. He told her about the first time he learned a board could vote you out of your own idea if you did not bring them along one meeting at a time. When the plates were clean, he brought out a small box that looked too modest to cause trouble. He placed it between them and did not touch it again. "I am not asking you a question," he said. "Not tonight. This is a key to the West Wing office and the Foundation records. If you find a number that wants to lie, make it tell the truth." She lifted the lid. The key gleamed in the soft light like a promise that had removed its jewelry. She closed the box and put it in her pocket. "I will use it," she said, "and if you ever ask me to misplace it, I will hand it back and walk." "I expect nothing else," he said. They stood at the threshold of the music room before sleep. The piano sat open, the lid a glossy black wing. He looked at her, then at the keys. "Play something," she said. "Not because it is pretty, because it is true." He played the line again, less perfect, more honest. The house listened. The West Wing breathed. Somewhere, a contractor finalized a bulk order for smoke detectors. Somewhere, a woman at a shelter read the email that said first and last month's rent were covered and texted 3 words to a friend who had kept her alive last winter. It's happening. Finally. Around midnight, Adrian's phone buzzed with a message that did not jolt his heart this time. Isabel's account had gone dark. The Insight had pulled their cue. Marshall's lawyer had requested a meeting and then canceled it before the hour ended. The documentary crew had emailed a question about access to the pantry in the mornings. Boring, beautiful problems. Before he slept, Adrian wrote one more line on the legal pad beneath house rules. Publish the ledgers on the first Tuesday, every quarter, even when the numbers make you wince. He put the pen down. He did not lock the drawer this time. Trust is a muscle. It grows by being used. On the landing, he paused outside the West Wing and heard a sound he had never heard there before. Not voices, not footsteps, air moving like it had a reason. He stood in it and let it pass through him, something cool and clean and stubborn. Then he went to bed, and for the first time in months, he slept without dreaming, in self-defense. The first week after the op-ed felt like a strange kind of quiet. Not silence. More like the house had finally chosen a tempo and refused to let anything rush it. The West Wing frames rose room by room. Electricians moved like careful surgeons. Margaret and Carla ran the pantry like a command center. The Maya Fund inbox filled with requests that read like weather reports from lives that had learned to work with storms. The attacks did not arrive as shouting. They came as small edits to reality. A forged email to a partner charity, polite and precise, asking them to reroute a grant to a different account. A batch of confidential tax records dumped online from a board member who served without pay and now wore shame like a jacket she had never chosen. A medium-sized blog published a piece from a person who claimed to be a foundation insider, alleging that the new fund was a front for moving old money through new pipes. Denton found the seams quickly. The email headers were wrong in a way that felt deliberate. The tax leaks were timed to a meeting on zoning for the West Wing, a meeting that would have been boring until someone tried to make it loud. The insider did not exist. The name belonged to a deceased clerk whose records could be found if you knew where the paper lived. "They want friction," Nia said at the pantry table that now served as war room. "They want us to react in anger so they can call it performance. Let us offer something slower. Let us put a camera in the one place that uses our oxygen and our time, and then let the world watch us breathe." "A documentary," Adrian said, and tasted the risk and the honesty at the same time. "Yes," Nia replied. "If we hide, they will invent. If we invite, they will still invent. But the footage will be heavier than their claims. We do not make a film about a billionaire and his redemption. We make a film about kitchens, ledgers, rooms that were once locked and are now keys. We let the crew see the invoices before they see the chandeliers." Denton groaned like a man who can see discovery requests in his sleep. It will be criticized. It will be called branding. It will make lawyers useful for 6 months. It will make the truth portable, Nia said. Pick a crew that is allergic to gloss. Give them access to the pantry before the ballroom. They started filming on a Wednesday, so the rhythm on screen would be an honest one. The cameras followed Carla as she rewrote the produce order with a pencil and a fixed jaw. They rode with Harold to the garage on 14th, where the mechanic called him brother and meant it. They stood back while Margaret examined mattresses and refused to be hurried because she had outlived more back pain than the contractor had seen. They sat quietly in a classroom where a scholarship recipient learned how to set her password without writing it on her hand. They watched Nia by the West Wing windows, turning a clipboard into a map. One morning, the crew asked Nia to walk the old staff corridor. She stopped in the middle of it, looked into the dark where time had stored other people's errands, and said what she had rehearsed in no mirror. I used to clean these floors. Now I sit at the table that sets the menu for who does the cleaning and how they are paid and how they go home. I did not change to earn the seat. I stopped asking the room for permission to take it. The clip was part of a short preview. It moved through group chats the way practical advice does, and through news feeds the way a song you did not expect to love does. Strangers wrote to say that they had paused it and replayed the line about permission, and then forwarded it to a sister or a supervisor or a self that had been quiet too long. The pushback arrived in the language of concern. An op-ed by an old donor who used to like his name on a plaque questioned whether philanthropy should be this personal. A pundit asked if transparency was a stunt when it was so well lit. A rival foundation hosted a panel on best practices that did not use names but did use shadows. Adrian stayed with the plan. Publish the ledgers. Answer specific questions with specific receipts. Decline invitations to debates that confuse theater with work. Every Tuesday at 9, the website showed grants sent, salaries covered, call logs answered, pantry purchases tallied. Boring became beautiful in a way he had not imagined. 2 days after the preview, Nia found a white envelope on her pillow. No stamp, no mark. Inside, a photograph she had not seen in 20 years. Georgia heat, a long shade from a broken stairwell, a motel with paint that surrendered in strips. A 15-year-old girl held the hand of a small child whose braids were too tight. On the back, a message in a block hand. You can leave the past. The past does not leave you. She stood for a long time with the photo in her hands and let memory do its work. Foster homes that smelled like effort or neglect depending on the week. A gas station clerk who let them sit under an awning during a storm and called the police with a voice that tried to be gentle. A motel manager who looked away because he had learned to survive by pretending not to see. She took the envelope to the wine cellar where Adrian was trying to decide if generosity tasted different when the bottle cost less. She did not speak. He read the message twice and looked at her face instead of the paper. He is following you now, Adrian said. Then we stop walking in circles, she answered. We tell the part we have not told. Not to pay anyone off, to clear a field. The next morning, Nia sat in a straight chair under soft daylight and told the camera what she had saved for courtrooms that never called her name. I was 15. My sister was 4. Our parents were gone. Some homes were kind. Some were practiced at hurting. I cleaned because it was work that traded time for money without asking for pieces of me I could not replace. I came to this house because I needed quiet that paid. If this past is supposed to shame me, it failed. I am not ashamed. I am alive and in motion, and I tell the truth because it builds better than lies do. The clip ran as a standalone. It did not trend with flame emojis. It moved like a tide. Teachers played it in rooms where students had learned the difference between pity and respect. Nurses shared it on night shifts because they recognized the tone of a person who has had to make plans inside fatigue. Social workers wrote that they felt seen without being turned into a romantic story. The Whisper campaign lost its breath. Anonymous accounts went elsewhere. The medium-sized blog posted a correction that did not apologize but did stop the bleeding. The donor with plaque tastes sent an email that said he would listen before he wrote again. Inside the house, the work kept its hands busy. The crew filmed a moment that would become their favorite without meaning to. Nia stood in the empty West Wing room that would be the first to open. She opened the window and the sash stuck and then gave. Fresh air entered a place that had been sealed for years. She laughed quietly. The laugh a person makes when something simple sounds like a hymn. Adrian watched the first coats of paint go on like a man learning to trust repetition. He met with the contractor and the inspector and two neighbors who had concerns about parking and noise. He brought them into the wing and showed them where the laundry would be and where the lights would dim and where the fire doors would latch soft. He spoke without selling. He offered phone numbers instead of speeches. People do not always want to be convinced. Sometimes they want to be included. Late one evening, after a day where nothing dramatic happened, and yet everything moved, he found Nia in the garden near the lavender beds. The plants had been cut back for the season and looked like resolve. The sky held its last light as if it trusted the next day to arrive. "Are you tired?" he asked. "I am good tired," she said. "The kind that belongs to you." He told her about a new email from the community college bursar. The city grant had arrived on time for the first time in years. 3 students did not drop out in week 1. One of them had written to say that staying felt like a new kind of weather in her chest. Nia took that in the way you take in a warm room after a long walk. She did not say a line about impact or scale. She looked at the soil. Then she looked at him as if she were measuring whether his face could hold another truth. "There is a thing I have not told you," she said. "When I speak at the camera, I do it for the women who will not be invited to stand there. But when I spoke about the motel, I did it for the girl I was." She needed to hear me tell it without flinching. "I am done flinching." He nodded. "I am done proving I am right by designing tests people cannot pass." They stood without speaking, shoulder to shoulder like people do when a bridge has been crossed without fanfare. The garden smelled like earth and something faintly sweet. Somewhere inside the house, someone closed a door carefully so the latch would not wake the person in the next room. The halls learned the sound of consideration. The documentary crew asked for one more scene that week. They wanted the pantry at 6 in the morning on a day when deliveries ran late and the coffee filters had been miscounted. Nia let them. The camera caught Margaret opening the back door with a look that said, "Today will not defeat me and Carla reworking a menu on the fly," with a laugh that made the room feel taller. The camera caught Nia telling a vendor that she respected his time and expected the same. The camera caught Adrian carrying boxes without announcing it, then putting them down and stepping out of the frame because a leader is not a mascot. The clip did not air. The editor said it was too ordinary. Nia smiled when she heard. "Ordinary is the prize," she said. "Keep it. We are building a life that can stand on days that do not make television." In the middle of that week, a courier delivered a thin package with stamps from Prague. Inside, a photograph of Marshall at a cafe with a woman whose dark glasses tried to erase her name. On the back, block letters. "Legends do not die. They wait." Adrian handed it to Nia without commentary. She looked at it for a long breath, then slid it into a folder and wrote a date on the tab. "We will not perform for you," she said to no one in the room. "We will outlast you." That night he returned to the music room. The piano was in tune for the first time in years. He played the line he had been practicing until it sounded like a promise kept instead of a promise rehearsed. Nia leaned on the doorway and listened. When he finished, she spoke into the kind of silence that has earned its right to stay. "You are learning to choose the slow victories," she said. "They last longer," he answered. The house agreed. The West Wing dried into its first coat. The pantry receipts lined up like a string of small reasons to believe. The ledgers posted on Tuesday right on time. A woman in Ward 7 texted her sister that the daycare had evening slots at last. A board member learned that she could survive a leak and remain herself. A driver who had carried other men's intentions for 2 decades went home early and ate with his wife while the food was still hot. At the very end of the week, as if timing itself were a character, Adrian woke in the dark for no reason he could name and walked the corridor toward the West Wing. He stopped outside the first finished room and pressed his palm to the door. Inside, paint and plaster and wiring had already begun the quiet work of holding. He stood there and realized that the test in the library had finally found its answer. Guard what matters. Leave what tempts. Cover what is human. He went back to bed and slept the kind of sleep that arrives when a man stops trying to be the only person in his own house who can keep it standing. The invitations went out without flourishes. Cream card, black ink, a time and a purpose. No embossed crests, no breathless copy about legacy. The Sterling Foundation annual gala, the first of its name, would be held beneath the high ceilings of Blackwell Hall because the House had decided to stop pretending it was only for looking at. The week before the event, the West Wing halls breathed paint and new wiring, the pantry ledger balanced to the penny, and the documentary crew argued about whether quiet could carry a 90-minute film. The city permitting office stamped the final approvals in a room where someone had taped a drawing of a lavender sprig to the wall. Margaret tested rental linens with the skepticism of someone who had seen stain-resistant claims die on first contact with red wine. Carla found a vendor for flowers who charged half and smiled twice as much. Harold mapped valet flow on a legal pad and shook his head at his own neatness. Nia refused to try on gowns. She brought an ironed navy dress from the back of her closet and said it would be enough. Margaret disagreed and quietly took in the sides of a midnight blue silk that had arrived in a box with no note. The hem skimmed the ground like it had been practicing for this haul all its life. When Nia saw herself in the mirror, she did not gasp. She nodded as if recognizing someone she had been building toward. Adrian wrote his remarks in the margins of ledgers. He refused adjectives that sparkled and chose verbs that carried weight. He did not practice in the mirror. He practiced by reading the names of people the fund had already touched out loud to the empty library, letting the syllables become the measure of the night. When he finished, he placed the pages beneath house rules and went to check the West Wing locks one more time, because anxiety traveled in old grooves and needed new routes. The evening came in on a calm sky. Lights ran along the drive like a promise kept politely. Couples stepped from cars and found their names not on place cards but on schedules of small tours that would walk them through rooms they had never been invited to notice. The string quartet did not play triumphal themes. They played songs that sounded like the pause between two deep breaths. Eileen arrived precisely on time, her pearls making peace with the dress she had chosen to soften them. She walked the West Wing with a hand gliding along the newel and nodded once at the sight of a door that closed softly. "This is proper," she said to no one, and allowed herself half a smile when she saw the laundry stacks gleaming like small, faithful machines. Reporters gathered where they were told and nowhere else. Denton had earned that boundary. The Chronicle's editor shook Adrian's hand, met Nia's eye, and said he planned to ask one question and then move out of the way. The insight sent no one. Isabel's accounts remained quiet. The photo from Prague sat in a folder labeled Pending Weather, because not every storm deserved a name. Adrian stood at the base of the staircase and watched Nia descend. She did not move like royalty, and the room did not treat her like one. It treated her like gravity, and he felt steadier for it. He offered a glass of water instead of champagne. She took it and tilted the rim in a small salute. "You ready?" she asked. "I am," he said, and for once the words were not in armor. Margaret hit the lights with the timing of a stage manager. The hall dimmed to a human glow. The quartet paused. The murmur answered with quiet. Adrian took the small stage without fanfare. He did not thank a list as long as an invoice. He thanked the three people whose names were never on a microphone. A day shift cleaner at the community college who had noticed students leaving early. A diner owner who let the foundation borrow a back room for intake interviews on scorching afternoons. And a security guard who learned to say good night in 2 languages because the West Wing would house people who felt safer when they heard home in a voice. He told the story of the Zurich account without throwing his father against a wall. He named it a confession. He named the fund that would spend it so thoroughly it could never stain again. He said the word audit twice and did not apologize. He promised ledgers on Tuesdays and receipts before speeches. He pointed toward the West Wing and let silence fill in the rest. Then he introduced the person who had taught the house to breathe. When Nia reached the microphone, the quartet's bows hovered like they were listening too. She did not unfold notes. She unfolded her hands and placed them on the edges of the podium to remind herself she owned her balance. "Good evening," she said, and the room tested the air of her voice and decided to trust it. "I have practiced a version of this night in my head without chandeliers. It looked like making rent. It looked like a child finishing a semester without changing buses 3 times at dusk. It looked like a door that latches soft so your neighbor can sleep. I came to this house because I needed quiet that paid. I stayed because I found work that did not ask me to leave my dignity in a locker. I am not an ornament on a story you can share at brunch. I am a ledger. I am a list. I am a woman who can tell you exactly how many minutes a laundry cycle takes and how far a dollar stretches when you stop buying food no one eats. She told them about the pantry rules, about first-week wages, about grant checks that arrived before syllabi did. She told them about a girl in a Georgia motel and a promise to a little sister made under a failing light. She did not cry. The room did not push her to. She let the past stand beside her without letting it take the microphone. I am not asking you to be moved, she said finally. I am asking you to pay attention. If you are moved after that, we will have room for you. If you are not, the work will continue without your applause. The applause that followed did not leap. It rose steady, like standing up from a long sit and remembering your knees can hold you. People clapped until their palms stung because there are nights when respect requires a sound. The tours began. In groups of 12, guests followed volunteers through the pantry, the laundry, the office where grant officers sat at sturdy desks that did not wobble. They walked the West Wing and touched the door and felt the soft click and understood the choice. A woman who had planned to judge the entire enterprise on principle stepped into a room and asked if she could sit for a minute. She did. When she stood, she wrote a number on a card that did not require a speech to justify. In a corner by the windows, the documentary crew filmed none of this. They were eating plates of food in the staff room because they understood that the best scenes sometimes belong to the people living them. They asked for 2 minutes later, and Nia nodded. Come tomorrow at 6, she said. The pantry will be open, and the camera will not get in the way of the first pot of coffee. Near the end of the night, Adrian found Nia on the veranda, where the air moved enough to cool a person back into herself. He had a small box in his pocket and felt it like a heartbeat he was not ready to release. He did not open it. He held out a different thing, a key attached to a simple leather tag stamped with 2 letters. MW. To the foundation office and to the West Wing master panel, he said. You have had access. This is ownership. If a number tries to lie, make it tell the truth even if it is mine. She took the key and turned it in her palm. I will, she said. And if I ever hand it back, you will know why. I will, he answered. From the ballroom came the soft notes of a final song. Eileen stood with the contractor discussing the merits of dimmer switches like a general learning new artillery. Harold taught a valet a better route out of the motor court to save 2 minutes in a collision. Margaret sent a tray of pastries home with a server who had mentioned a child in a morning. Carla rewrote tomorrow's produce order in a corner because a vendor called with a deal that would halve the cost without cutting quality. The Chronicle's editor approached and asked his single question. What do you want this night to do when it ends? Adrian did not deflect. I wanted to make Tuesday easier, he said. And I wanted to shut a door that should never have been opened. If people came for secrets, they were disappointed. If they came for schedules, they will be useful. The editor nodded, thanked them both, and disappeared into the practical ballet of breaking down an event without breaking the house. When the guests were gone and the lights fell to their softer selves, Nia and Adrian walked the West Wing one more time. They stood in the first finished room. The air carried a faint newness and the certainty of walls that would do their job. Nia placed a hand on the window frame. In 3 days, she said, a woman will sleep here whose name we will not publish. She will get up at 5, work a shift, and come back at 2. The door will not betray her. The hall will not judge her. The light will be kinder than any she has met this year. That is what this night is for. He reached into his pocket, touched the small velvet box, then let it be. He was learning to put ceremony where it belonged, not in the middle of work. At the end of a season the work had earned. They turned off the lights one by one. The hall hummed with the quiet of machines that knew their tasks. Outside, the lawn held the last footprints of the evening and promised to forget them by morning. In the kitchen, the dishwasher sang a low mechanical hymn and then rested. The music room was open. The piano lit a patient wing. On the landing, they paused. He looked at her. She looked at him. There are moments when language would like to perform. Neither of them invited it. They nodded the way people nod after pushing the last box into a room that will be a home soon. In the dark, the house settled like a person finding a comfortable side. Somewhere in Prague, a man in a coat glanced at a phone that did not ring. Somewhere online, a thread went unanswered. Somewhere in Ward 7, a daycare closed at 10 with tired staff and clean floors, and 4 new evening slots already spoken for the next week. Adrian sat at the library table and added a line to house rules. Celebrate in ways that make tomorrow lighter. He set the pen down and without thinking, slid the drawer shut without a key. Trust, like any muscle, grows while you sleep. He was tired enough to give it the night. Morning after the gala felt like a room exhaling. Blackwell Hall did not glow with the leftover glitter of a party. It pulsed with lists. Rental trucks idled, cords coiled, glassware counted back into crates. The West Wing smelled faintly of new paint and warm laundry, a promise with a clean shirt on. On the pantry whiteboard, Margaret had written 2 words, Tuesday waits. The Chronicle ran 3 photos and 10 paragraphs, none of them breathless. The headline didn't crown anyone. It read like a receipt. Zurich confession becomes childcare, housing, tuition. The comment section stayed mostly quiet, as if the evening had taken the oxygen out of the arguments and given it back to the people who needed to breathe. At 6, the documentary crew returned, cameras slung low, eyes soft from too little sleep. Nia pointed them to the pantry first. "This is the spine," she said. "Everything else is a limb." Carla handed the cameraman a coffee and told him to stand where he wouldn't get burned when the steam hit. He obeyed without looking like a man obeying. A new email from the community college bursar landed at 9:12. 3 first-week checks cleared early, it said. For the first time, no withdrawals due to timing. Our registrar cried, then pretended she didn't. Adrian read it out loud without pretending not to. At noon, the first West Wing resident arrived with a bag that looked tired and a face that knew how to take in a room without letting it judge her. Nia met her at the door. "You're early," she said. "That means you made it through a day without 3 delays." "Good omen." The woman nodded once. She had the look of someone who had learned not to gamble with hope in public. They walked the hall together. Nia showed how the key turned smooth, how the door latched soft, how the window stuck a little at the top but would give if you spoke to it like a person who deserved patience. She showed the laundry room and said the machines took 37 minutes on normal, 58 on heavy, and that naps were encouraged between cycles. She showed the office downstairs where grant officers sat with bound notebooks and an insistence that no one say case when they meant person. The woman tested the bed with a palm. "Quiet," she said. "On purpose," Nia answered. When the door closed, the hallway air shifted in a way that made both women swallow hard and pretend it was just the dry paint. A home had begun. Sometimes it's that unceremonious. Denton called with a different kind of news. Marshall's counsel floated a meeting, he said, then canceled. Twice. Isabel filed nothing. Her account stayed dark. Someone sent a photo from Prague again. No message this time. "Let him wait," Adrian said. "We're busy." Waiting is not idle. It is a choice to spend your rations on the useful thing. By afternoon, the footage the crew had gathered began to line up in small stories. A vendor taking an extra minute to load boxes evenly so they wouldn't split on the curb. Harold showing a new valet the angle that spared the rosemary hedge. Margaret demonstrating how to fold a fitted sheet into something that didn't resent you. Nia sitting with the grant officer in the pantry, a legal pad between them, making sure a request was right-sized, neither stingy nor theatrical. "Cut the hero shots," the director said in the editing bay. "Let the minutes do the work." A letter arrived from Eileen with a box of papers tied in a ribbon that did not match her pearls. Inside, Adrian's mother's letters to a friend in Prague, to a sister in Chicago, to herself in margins where she practiced being honest. Phrases lifted like tiles. Make the house tell the truth. Teach the rooms to forgive noise. Leave enough light in the corners for a child to find the way out. Adrian read them aloud to Nia that evening in the library, his voice careful, as if reading could scratch the paper. "She knew," Nia said softly. "Before you did. Before all of this did." "She did," he answered, and the admission had the weight of a benediction. The next day, the fund published its first Tuesday set after the gala. Not a press release, 4 tables and a downloadable CSV. The sums were not grand. They were stubborn. Rent deposits sent, laptops bought, a bus pass log with a field for arrival time compared to last month. The first angry email came from a man who liked capital letters. It said the ledger lacked narrative juice. Sorry, Carla replied from the pantry account. Narrative juice is what people use when the pantry's empty. She got 3 quiet thank yous and 1 invite to speak at a neighborhood meeting. She accepted the meeting. Marshall's next move arrived in paper with no notarization and a header that looked like it had tried too hard. A whistleblower, anonymous, accused the fund of favoritism because 3 recipients had a mutual friend. Denton traced the timing to a gap in the city clerk's public posting schedule and shook his head. They're trying to make bureaucracy misfile you, he said. If we answer every pebble, we'll never lay roads. We won't, Adrian said, and didn't. He posted the selection rubric again. He added a line, if you think we missed someone, show us. They did. And the next Tuesday, Ledger added 2 names that had been overlooked because someone mistyped a zip code. The documentary crew asked for one last scene that wasn't in the plan. We want to film you doing nothing, the director said to Adrian. I'm not very good at that, he answered. Do it anyway, Nia said. People need to see that your hands aren't always in the frame. He sat on the veranda while the house moved around him. The camera kept a distance. He did not pose. He watched a robin insist on the right branch for 7 minutes and felt irrational tenderness for insistence done without performance. He watched Nia cross the lawn with a stack of folded blankets, the good kind, the ones with edges that make you believe someone believes in you, and felt his throat tighten with a memory, a library, a Bible, a blanket pulled up by hands that refused to be bought. His eyes stung. He did not perform being moved. He let it pass through, unhidden. The premiere of the documentary was not a red carpet event. The crew rented the community college auditorium because the seats were comfortable and the parking was free. Tickets were a suggested $5 that funded the campus food pantry. People came wearing jackets they could work in and shoes that could stand in line. The lights went down without applause. The film began before anyone could decide whether to clap. It was not cinematic in the way festivals prefer. It was specific. It dwelt on time, not triumph. It made Tuesday a protagonist and receipts a chorus. When the scene arrived where Nia opened the stuck window and the sash gave, a low sound went through the audience, the noise people make when a small thing proves a large truth. Afterward, there was no Q&A. The crew thanked the room and pointed to a table with flyers, West Wing volunteer shifts, pantry donation lists, supply drives for the community center library. People lined up and took the flyers without asking for selfies. In the parking lot, under lights that whined a little, a woman approached Nia with a teenage boy in a hoodie. This is Andrew, she said. We're not here for that, Andrew. We're here because he wants to volunteer at the library. He says he's good at reading to people who don't think they like books yet. The boy shrugged. I just do voices good, he said. Nia laughed, a sound that made the parking lot feel like a room. On the way home, Adrian drove the long way, past the community center where construction lights threw pale squares onto the ground, like paper futures. He parked at the edge of the lavender beds, now cut back for winter, and turned off the engine. The night was the right kind of cold. It made breath visible, which is a kind of honesty. You're carrying something, Nia said in the hush. He took the small velvet box from his pocket. I have been for days, he said. He opened it, and the ring looked modest and certain, as if it had been carved from a word that didn't lie. I told myself I would ask when the lavender bloomed, he said. But I don't want to wait for proof of spring to live like it's coming. Nia R. Carter, will you? Yes, she said too quickly to be theatrical, and then laughed at herself. I should have let you finish. Ask again. I'll give the moment the dignity it deserves. He took a breath and asked again, slower, and she said yes again, slower too, like vows learned to match tempo when they plan to last. He slid the ring on and it fit the way clear decisions do. They didn't return to the house right away. They sat with the engine off and let the quiet tell them this wasn't a scene. It was a seam. 2 lives stitched without pretending the fabric had never been torn. When they finally stood, the frost had found the grass, and their footprints left a pattern that would be gone by morning. Good. Not everything belongs to the archive. The next week arrived with a municipal audit request that didn't surprise anyone, and a city council member who wanted a tour without cameras. Adrian walked him through the West Wing, answered questions without varnish, and left space for doubt to turn into trust instead of performing over it. In the laundry room, the councilman ran his hand along the edge of a folding table and said, "My mother would have liked this place. It doesn't argue with people." The woman in room 103 left a note at the desk on day 7. "The door sound is my favorite sound," it read. "It closes soft. I sleep so hard I wake up embarrassed. Thank you for making me safe enough to be embarrassed." Tuesday came with a hiccup. A wire transfer stalled in an intermediary bank. Nia and the grant officer handled it with a methodical ferocity that would have frightened a lesser problem. They called, escalated, documented, got the funds moving, and wrote a small process change so the hiccup wouldn't return. Later, Adrian found the change log and smiled. The entry ended with Nia's handwriting. "Remind the future this happened." Isabel resurfaced for a moment with a post that implied without saying. The comment count didn't break triple digits. The world had found other things to be interested in. Marshall's lawyer sent one last letter that sounded like a door closing in an empty room. Then nothing. Spring crept in on edges, crocuses that didn't ask permission, sun that stayed 5 minutes longer each evening like a guest who knows they're welcome. The lavender pushed new green that looked too delicate to survive and always does. The West Wing gained 3 more residents who learned to sleep without fear of footsteps pausing outside their door. On a Wednesday that tasted like lemon and resolve, the daycare coordinator sent a photo. 4 kids on a carpet with books, mouths open, unaware of the camera. The caption read, "We hired the second evening teacher. No one cried at drop-off this week. That's new." Adrian printed the photo and taped it inside the drawer with the house rules. He read the rules again, added a 6th line, then crossed it out because it made the list try too hard. He wrote instead, "Tuesday is an oath." That evening, as the sun laid a soft order on the lawns, he found Nia where he often did, near the lavender, shoes off, toes in the cold ground. She looked up, and the look on her face held both the girl from the motel and the woman who had taught a house to breathe. "Happy Tuesday," he said, even though it was Wednesday. "Happy always," she answered, even though it never is. He took her hand and placed it against his chest, not for romance alone, but for calibration. "Do I seem different to you?" he asked, half smiling. "You seem like a man who has stopped designing tests he hopes people fail," she said, "and that will last longer than a headline." They walked the West Wing together, pausing at each door as if doors were a kind of prayer. In room 103, a lamp glowed with the quiet of a person reading. In room 107, someone had taped a child's drawing to the wall, a house with windows, a sun with too many rays, a person with outstretched arms. In the laundry room, a machine hummed the sound of clothes remembering their shape. At the far end of the hall near the exit, a small table held a basket of toiletries and a sign that said, "Take what you need." A note lay under the sign, a wobbly scrawl, a felt-tip sincerity. "I didn't know houses could be this kind." "They can," Nia said, and reached out to straighten the note as if grammar and kindness both deserved neatness. They stood at the back doors and looked out at the lavender beds. Adrian thought of his father, of a boy kneeling to tell another boy that his name would be what he built, of a Bible laid over money, of a blanket pulled up over a man who had not earned it and then later tried to. He thought of Eileen's box of letters and of the line about leaving enough light in the corners. He thought of Margaret's pancakes and Carla's produce order and Harold's neat map of the motor court and of how all those small, specific things grew into a life you could stand in. "You know," he said, "for a long time I kept trying to make marble tell my story." Nia smiled without turning, eyes on the ground that would soon be purple and alive. "Marble's a good listener," she said, "but it doesn't pay the rent. Roots do." They went back inside because dinner doesn't make itself and schedules don't keep themselves, and the best kind of future is made out of 10-minute tasks done on time. In the kitchen, the griddle warmed under Margaret's supervision. In the office, the grant officer closed her laptop with the soft satisfaction of completed lists. In the music room, the piano lid sat open, reflecting the ceiling like a lake that had learned stillness on purpose. Before bed, Adrian pulled out the drawer and looked at the rules. He touched the paper the way a man touches a stone he's worn smooth with worry and finally, with use. He put the Zurich letter beside the photo of the kids on the carpet. Confession and fulfillment. Then he slid the drawer shut without turning the key because trust can become a habit the same way suspicion does. He slept well, and when he didn't, it wasn't because of ghosts. It was because the list for tomorrow was long and worth the effort. The house slept too, practicing its new language. Doors closing soft, machines humming, footsteps that did not sneak. Somewhere a woman woke at 2, remembered where she was, and smiled before falling back asleep. Morning would come, and with it coffee, ledgers, deliveries, the West Wing's gentle clicks. Somewhere a child would draw another sun with too many rays. Somewhere a man in Prague would look at a phone that did not ring. Somewhere Tuesday would arrive again, right on time. Legacies don't live in marble. They live in this. A blanket pulled up, a Bible laid down, a door that closes softly, and a ledger that tells the truth even when it makes you smaller. They live in the hands that choose, every day, unphotographed, to guard what matters, leave what tempts, and cover what is human.